Good morning and welcome to the WellMed Charitable Foundation Caregiver Teleconnection session. My name is Evelyn Greb. I'll be your facilitator today. With us, we have two very esteemed professors, and one's a public health expert, one's a social worker. I want to tell you a little bit about them. These are our presenters for the day. Elliot Montgomery Sklar is an associate professor of health science at Nova Southeastern University in Florida. He's worked as an educator, researcher, and leader of community-based health programs in the US and Canada for over 15 years. He has a doctorate degree in public health and teaches disease outbreak and investigation, which has been central to the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the pandemic began, he's helped to facilitate over 75 sessions to support caregivers during this time for the WellMed Charitable Foundation, the American Public Health Association, and more senior living communities across the country. Lucy Barylak has a master's degree in social work from McGill University. She's presently working as a consultant for a health network in Montreal, Canada. She's been involved in various research projects and has published numerous articles related to caregiving issues. She's lectured at several universities and colleges on innovative approaches to caregiving and presents annually at international and national conferences. Lucy's also a consultant for private industry in the United States, including her work with the WellMed Charitable Foundation and clinics in Texas. In addition, Lucy would like you to know that she was a caregiver herself for her mother for 10 years. And with that, Lucy, Elliot, please take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I hope that everyone is doing well, keeping healthy. And to those participants who might be in Florida or the Southeast US, I hope you have a safe passage through the storm. You know, it's certainly been a while since we dedicated a program to COVID-19, but we felt it was really important right now, especially since the new bivalent boosters were approved earlier this month. There's also a lot of misinformation going around that we wanted to help to correct, and this is a safe space to ask questions and gather information. You know, personally, I was a little heartbroken when I heard President Biden say that the pandemic is over on 60 Minutes the other week. We know that the pandemic is not over. Certainly, if you're a caregiver or a healthcare professional, you know that. The acute phase of the pandemic might be over, but COVID is very much still in our communities. And in fact, it's just a little over 70% of all counties reporting data in the United States have what are considered to be high COVID transmission rates. So we know that COVID is unfortunately not over. Our booster rates are quite low. And I think by saying that the pandemic is over, that's not going to help the effort to get those booster rates up. We also need to remember that kids are back at school. About 400 people a day are still dying from COVID-19 in the US. Our community transmission might be down in some areas, but given how contagious the new strains are, I think it's important for us to be aware, and especially if you're someone with chronic health conditions or caring for someone with chronic health conditions. We're also going to talk about the flu vaccine and about monkeypox, and most importantly, as I said, we're here to answer questions. So without further ado, because it's a lot to cover in 1 hour, let's get right into it. And I wanted for us to begin our conversation by discussing a study that you may have seen or heard headlines about, which is really central to the population of older adults and caregivers served by the teleconnection. And you might have seen some of these headlines in the news last week, citing a recent study of more than 6 million people 65 and older, which found that seniors who had COVID-19 had a significantly higher risk of being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease within a year. The study does not show that COVID-19 causes Alzheimer's, but it adds to the growing body of research drawing links between COVID infection and cognitive function. Now, with Alzheimer's disease, however, we have learned and we know that disease in the brain begins well before symptoms emerge, sometimes decades prior. So it makes it a little troubling for me to see headlines that show a connection between COVID infection and Alzheimer's, given that we know that Alzheimer's isn't something that just all of a sudden happens. So there are some reasons why this study might have found this connection. Certainly, COVID infection causes inflammation in the body, which may heighten changes already happening in the brain. This does happen with other viruses too. Now, this latest study, which was published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, found that there were about 7 new diagnoses of Alzheimer's disease for every 1,000 seniors documented, compared with about 5 new diagnoses for every 1,000 seniors who did not have COVID. So this data is also captured from last year, 2021. We need to remember that in 2020, the pandemic presented serious delays for individuals seeking out diagnoses for conditions like dementia and Alzheimer's, for example, meaning these results could be driven by those who already had Alzheimer's disease, and then they had not yet been able to seek out a formal diagnosis. Now, that would make sense based upon the snapshot of data. We're also seeing, for example, higher rates of cancer diagnosis and diagnosis of other illnesses. So I think it's something certainly for us to follow over time, but not something to panic about. And in the last week, I've gotten a lot of questions about this study and this connection. So the study shows a linkage, but no cause and effect, no real hard evidence. But I think it might have been a concerning headline to see. So I was curious if anyone participating today had any questions about this or wanted to discuss anything concerning this headline.
So folks, if you're on the phone, just press *6 to unmute yourself, or if you're on Zoom, you can use the hand signal. Go to the chat room, whichever you like.
So much news and information coming out, which is great, but we also have to learn how to be very critical consumers of the information and of the headlines we're reading.
Yeah, it is very frightening if you look at it, just the headline, very, very concerning. But the way you explain it certainly makes sense that we have to kind of take it a bit with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. So since I see we have no questions about this, let's talk about the new bivalent booster. As of September the 1st, the CDC authorized an updated COVID vaccine with the goal of fending off a surge in cases this coming fall and winter. So Moderna and Pfizer both have new, what are called bivalent vaccines. And all that means is bivalent, it targets 2 strains of COVID, the original strain and the new Omicron strains, specifically the BA4 and BA5, which have been rapidly spreading throughout the last few months. Now, the guidance says that at this point, everyone 12 and over is eligible for the updated booster, and those 18 and up are eligible for Moderna's updated booster. So for many of you participating today, this might mean a 4th, a 5th, or even a 6th vaccine for COVID for some people. And that might seem like a lot, but we need to remember, much like the flu vaccine, we get the flu vaccine each year, or we should. It's become part of the norm, or it should be, because each year the flu vaccine targets different variants of the flu that are predicted to be the most common in that upcoming flu season. So that is to say that each year consecutively, we might not be receiving the same flu vaccine, much like this updated COVID vaccine. It's not that much different. Now, we've been living in this perpetual COVID-19 season, though, for the last 2.5 years. And I do believe that we're going to need to get used to these vaccines being part of that repertoire. I wouldn't be surprised if COVID boosters will become part of a flu vaccine down the road in years to come. In fact, that is what happened with the Hong Kong flu, which was a pandemic actually back in 1968, 69. It killed over 4 million people globally. Now, the evolution of the Hong Kong flu is a lot like what we're seeing with aspects of COVID-19. The new variants are becoming much less virulent. We don't have as many people dying. The symptoms are not as bad. Now, as with the last booster shot and the original vaccines, side effects are to be expected. And in fact, side effects show that the vaccine is working. So here's what I think it's important to know about the new vaccine and about potential side effects. The reason that we are asked to wait when we get the vaccine for about 15 minutes upon administration is because most bad side effects happen immediately. The side effects so far reported from the bivalent vaccine are basically the same as the original strain. And if you do get side effects like a fever or chills or muscle or joint pain, it's important for us to remember that unfortunately those side effects are actually a good thing. It means that our bodies are responding as they're supposed to in response to what is being injected into us. But I think it's especially important for caregivers to plan. If you're going to get the vaccine, arrange for respite care the following day. Make sure that you have some help around if you're not feeling well. If you're someone who had experienced symptoms after getting the vaccine in the past, very likely that you might get them this time around too. So my suggestion is certainly to plan. If you're someone who has dealt with tiredness, fever, headache, or even if you're just feeling anxious about the potential side effects, I think it's so important that we diminish as much as we can to stress us out, and having a plan to have an easy next day, have prepared food around, that can be certainly very helpful. But I think it's certainly very important that we do get this new bivalent booster. The most recent subvariants, as I mentioned, are more contagious than ever, and they are supposed to become more transmissible as the virus becomes easier to mutate. Now, we're also learning that previous COVID infection does not provide us with as much protection as we would have hoped. And we have to remember the goal of a virus is to infect more and more people. And that's why it mutates to become more and more contagious. So the best way that we can protect ourselves with from Omicron is getting this new bivalent booster. So I wanted to ask, because I know it's a lot of information, if anyone has any questions at this point.
So folks, if you're on the phone, press *6. If you're on your Zoom, you probably know how to talk to us either on the chat or by unmuting yourself. And I have a little program that I can see if you've done that. Anybody? Love to hear from you.
I will talk a bit more about what happens to our immune systems as we age, because that is another important factor as to why it is even more important to get the booster. I do
Andrea Cooper wanted to talk to you.
I just want to clarify that what you're saying is that the booster targets both the original COVID virus as well as the subvariants.
Correct. It specifically the Omicron subvariant, BA4 and BA5,
Okay.
which are the strains right now that we're seeing more actively in our communities.
But at the same time, it targets the original, so it's
correct.
It's just two totally separate things that it knows to target, I guess.
So they're related, but just like with the flu vaccine, for example, this year, the flu vaccine, it is a 4-strain flu vaccine. So you can think of this as sort of like half of that. This vaccine targets 2 things. These vaccines, the technology behind them has been able to adapt very quickly to the subvariants that we're seeing. And what is expected is that the new bivalent vaccine will give us better protection. It replaces the previous boosters, which only targeted the original strain.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. And I see we have a question in the chat from Minerva. If you don't fall under the chronic disease category, how often should you get the booster? It's a great question and something we're going to talk a little bit more about shortly. But certainly speak with your doctor. That is my best recommendation, because quite frankly, in the last week since putting this presentation together, the guidance on when to get the booster has even changed. So there's a lot of evolving information. I was recently at a pharmacy and I heard a pharmacist telling someone that, they could get a vaccine, the new booster at a certain point, which was counter to what the CDC's recommendation is. So I think what happens now in this fight against COVID is that we have new tools and we're learning and adapting how to best use those tools for different people. Not everyone's body is the same. So I wanted actually, since this is a good segue, to talk about something else that's important, especially for female caregivers and for women in general, because for a while, women had been told to postpone mammograms if getting a booster, because one of the side effects from the booster shots, and this is true for the bivalent booster as well, are swollen lymph nodes. And I bring this up because we know from previous research that female caregivers are much less likely to get a routine mammogram than a non-caregiver. So with that said, there is new guidance that has said that you should not delay a mammogram. If you are getting a booster, simply let the technician know and let your doctor know. If you have a mammogram scheduled soon after your COVID booster, again, just let your doctor know so that they can address any potential imaging issues. Now, it's, I think, very important, as I said, because there has been some contrary information and evolving information. This is one of those areas. And health prevention, including mammograms, is something that's so important. And again, we know that caregivers are less likely to get preventative routine screenings. So please don't delay. And that is why I bring this up specifically, because there is new guidance that was just published.
Good to know.
That's a lot of wonderful information, Elliot. How long do you have to wait to get this new booster if you recently had one? That's a question that I'd like to know for sure.
That seems to be a moving target. It's a great question. Officially, the CDC is advising adults to wait at least 2 months from a previous booster. But as I mentioned, my local pharmacist was advising seniors that they could get their booster 2 to 3 weeks after getting a previous booster. And this was last week. So that is certainly different. I've also heard doctors suggesting to wait longer than that, as long as 4 months from your previous shot. So again, the CDC is saying 2 months after your last booster or 3 months after your last COVID infection. Some immunologists are also saying 3 months after either COVID infection or your last booster. So there's a lot of different information. I think it's important for us to remember that the bivalent booster was meant to be put out into the market ahead of cold and flu season, where Omicron has been expected to be more prevalent. Now, I'm not sure also if the varying guidance is being intentionally flexible to allow people to get their flu shot and their bivalent booster at the same time. Now, I say this because I'm being a little analytical, and overall, our booster rates are low. So I think this might be one way of trying to encourage people to come in and get your flu and your booster in one, and thus a little more flexibility with time. As I mentioned, we have new tools to fight COVID, and not everyone's body or the engineering of one's body, let's say, uses the same tools to work the best. So my advice is really to speak with your doctor, because it might make sense to space out the vaccine a little bit more if you recently had one, or based upon the community transmission rates where you might be living. So I wish it was a simple 3 months, wait 3 months, but I'm seeing that there's a lot of different information. So that's why I encourage people, based upon your own specific risk factors, to speak with your doctor.
Okay, so you did answer part of what I was asking. So just to be clear, for everyone, including myself. So when should people get the flu shot? And can you get the flu shot at the same time as the new booster? It's a little repetitious, but I just want to be very clear about that.
Absolutely. And again, this is good that we're talking about all these things. I think it's important for people to know that you can get them at the same time. I think it's very important for caregivers, especially with planning, because you can then just do both in one shot, so to speak, and then take the next day off or get respite care if you can. I think that's much easier for caregivers personally. But again, you might want to speak with your doctor or your pharmacist about that. In the past, whenever I've gotten the flu shot, I haven't felt great. And when I've gotten the COVID shot, I haven't felt great. And when I got them both together, I felt even less great. But I was happy to get them over with in one time. We have to remember also, both vaccines take a little bit of time for our immune system to be activated, to build that immune defense that we're looking for. So timing is important. As far as when you should get the flu shot, now would be the time. The weather is getting colder up north, where flu season often begins, and it takes a few weeks from the time of the vaccine for your body to develop protection. Now, we know that it is also possible to get COVID and the flu together at the same time. People have. So I think it's especially important to be vaccinated for both. Now, with regards to the flu shot, I also wanted us to talk about flu shots that are specifically designed for seniors age 65 and older to protect them against the flu. According to the CDC, and there is a lot of research to back this up, seniors need stronger protection because our immune systems weaken with age. And that puts seniors at a greater risk for serious flu-related complications such as pneumonia, hospitalization. The flu can also worsen chronic illnesses such as diabetes, asthma, COPD. So this is really important. The senior flu shot creates a stronger immune response, and it helps older adults' immune systems to fight the flu more effectively than the regular flu shot. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those nuances. But I have a map here that I just wanted people to see, because you can actually chart the flu activity in your specific state and even in your county to help you in making a decision. What is interesting this year is I had said that flu season usually starts in the north, where it gets colder and people are indoors more. But if you look at this map, which reports data that ended just a couple of weeks ago, the state that has the highest flu transmission seems to be Texas and DC, the two of those. So it's a little bit different this year. So I think it's, like I said, we have all these tools at our disposal. And if you are someone who's interested and you want to look at the activity where you might be located, for example, if I were in Texas, I would want to make sure I had my flu vaccine now. And I wouldn't want to delay or wait upon that because of the current transmission rate. So I'm going to talk a little bit more here about those flu vaccines for seniors. There are two kinds. You can ask for them by name. You can speak with your pharmacist. Now, older adults can get any flu vaccine approved for their age group, but there are two vaccines specifically designed for seniors. And the first one is the Fluzone High Dose Quadrivalent. So the quad for 4. So there are 4 strains of the flu that you are protected against with that one. And then there is an adjuvanted flu vaccine called Fluad. What an adjuvant is essentially a booster. So it just heightens the efficacy of what you're being vaccinated against. Now, this vaccine also is made up of different strains of the flu. One of them is for 3 strains, and a quadrivalent, a 4-strain adjuvanted vaccine, is also available now. So if you're a senior or a caregiver, and The reason I bring this up is because I haven't seen much talk about this, and you don't see ads specifically very much for the senior flu vaccine on TV, though I did just see one last week. And a lot of studies have found that the higher dose senior flu shot better protects older adults against the flu as compared to the standard flu vaccine. So be sure to speak with your pharmacist or your doctor about this as well.
Thank you, Elliot. I have a last question for you. Should we still be wearing masks? Because I know that when I go shopping to a grocery store, I put on my mask, but many times I'm the only one wearing it. So I thought maybe if you can just go over that a little bit.
Sure. Another headline that didn't really make much attention in the news is last Friday, very quietly, the CDC actually dropped their mask recommendations for medical settings. I was surprised to see that. We have seen certainly masks have gone by the wayside in a lot of places. And over the course of the summer, I've traveled to different parts of the country, to Canada. I've certainly seen mask wearing almost as a cultural thing at this point. Depends where you are and depends the population, but it's a really good question. My answer, I would say, would really depend on each person. Number one, what you're comfortable with. To me, that's first and foremost. Certainly, I felt for a great while much more comfortable having the dual protection of a mask and knowing I was vaccinated. We also have to be really sensitive with emotions at play here. And if a mask makes people feel safe, then I think that it's worth wearing. Again, masks have also become habit for a lot of people. And people find it easier to maintain habit rather than breaking it and then starting it again if we have to go back to mask wearing. So my personal feeling is that the point of our vaccines and the development of treatments for COVID was to be able to let our guard down a little. To me, that would include wearing a mask. So I don't wear a mask, frankly, if I am outdoors. If I'm shopping for groceries and the store is not too crowded. But if I am taking an airplane, I have my N95 mask on. I had to attend graduation last month and there were 10,000 people there. And you can be sure I had my N95 mask on. I'm up to date on all of my shots with the exception of the new bivalent booster. That answer might be different if I wasn't. That answer might also be different if I had COPD or if I were on a medication, for example, that suppresses the immune system, like a biologic or a steroid. The other thing is our immune systems do weaken as we age, as I mentioned. So even if we're fully vaccinated, our age puts us at some level of risk. So it's a loaded question and a loaded answer that I think, and this is it, you know, things are becoming a little bit more murky. And I think that we're seeing that.
I think I saw on the chat, there was 2 questions for you.
Yes. So Andrea asked, I've heard, I believe from the CDC, that it's a good idea for seniors to get flu shots later in the fall, as it doesn't last as long in seniors. So it may not last until the spring if gotten too early. Do you agree? Yes and no. Yes, the flu vaccine is most effective as soon as your body builds immunity from it. So I would say a few weeks after getting the flu vaccine, let's say 2-3 weeks. It will wane in protection as the months go on into the springtime. That's sometimes why we get spring outbreaks of the flu. That happened to me one year. I had gotten my flu shot in September, pretty early in the season, and I wound up getting the flu in April. It wasn't as bad, but I did test positive for the flu nevertheless, and it wasn't great. So it's a great question. The reason I showed that map that I did, and in our resources today, you'll have that link so you can check to see what your community level transmission of the flu is. I think that should be part of everyone's decision. For example, I was saying that typically flu season starts in the north. The recommendation from the CDC and from the American Medical Association and other groups is to get the flu shot in September or October, and as early as possible, depending on where you live, if you live further north. But this year we're seeing Texas had a large outbreak, and so did DC. So if you lived in those areas, you might want to get vaccinated sooner. And that's why I say it's good to speak with your doctor or your pharmacist, because they know what the community level transmission is. So that's my answer to that one. The other comment that we got is, how long is it before the flu vax starts to wear off? That's usually why I wait until December 15th for the flu shot. It's a great question. So again, most doctors, most medical groups will tell you to get the flu shot no later than October. But that might be different depending on your circumstances, where you live, what your doctor might recommend. Last year, I didn't get the flu shot actually until I think around late November or early December, just because I was waiting to get it at the same time as my booster and when I became eligible for my booster. But we had large flu outbreaks last year, especially around Thanksgiving. This year, Thanksgiving travel is projected to be the highest it has been in a very, very, very long time. And we know that those are really big reasons why we have community level spread. And so that's also why it is recommended that we get the vaccine, for example, in October, because it would take a couple of weeks before we developed protection.
Elliot, I have a question. So these really high dose quadrivalent vaccines and the adjuvanted vaccines, if you get all of that in one shot, in addition to a booster, are you going to have more side effects?
No. So our flu vaccines, standard or the high dose, have typically been quadrivalent vaccines for the last several years. So in years past, we have been vaccinated for multiple strains of flu, and many of us got the previous booster in tandem. What I will say, and I learned this from an immunologist that I work with, and I loved the terminology that she explained to me. When we get vaccinated, it busies our immune system. Our immune system goes to work in helping to figure out what's been injected into our bodies and what to do with it, and then developing protection from the vaccine. So during that period of time, that's why we sometimes feel sick and we feel run down after getting it, because our bodies are working very hard. So this is just how all of this works. It also does make us a little bit more susceptible to catching colds and things right after getting vaccinated, because our immune system is busy working on something else. So that's why I say it's a great idea to just take a day off after you get a vaccine, go home, have some soup, plan on watching some TV, stay in for a day or two if you need to, plan for it. We do have some more chat messages. Let's see, after waiting until December 15th, I no longer got the flu in March, April, right? That would make sense. Is this also likely to happen with the COVID vaccine? Yes, we have seen that the COVID vaccine works best in the first couple of months after we get it. So that's why people might be getting a fourth, fifth, even a sixth booster at this point, depending on pre-existing health conditions, any type of weakened immune system that you might have. I certainly don't expect that the vaccine will last terribly long. That's why I think it's important that we look at community transmission. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as our program goes on. I will also offer up my Google skill set to look up community transmission in your specific community if you'd like. And in our resources, we will have links for you to look that up as well.
Thank you. Is that it for the questions?
Yeah.
Elliot and I have been talking about this pandemic, and basically we have to keep in mind at all times that there's two pandemics going on. There's a mental health pandemic as well. And, a lot of people are unsure of who to trust or what to trust. It's hard to cope with uncertainty. And just what you were presenting today, there's so many things going on that's so uncertain. But uncertainty is always a part of our lives. We have to accept that. However, uncertainty has been magnified in real ways by our experience of pandemic. And this has been especially true for caregivers who were separated from loved ones in long-term care. We've heard from caregivers whose care recipient is in long-term care, react anxiously or negatively when a visit comes to an end because they're afraid they won't see that visitor again if there is another lockdown. So I'm just wondering, I know we're kind of going a little bit off topic, but it has a lot to do with our emotional well-being. Has anyone experienced that lately, that if you have someone in long-term care and you're going to visit them, they're anxious, they're afraid that you might not come back if there is a lockdown?
Feel free to unmute your phone by pressing *6, or unmute yourself on Zoom, or go to the chat room, or put your hand up.
I've had a lot of caregivers talking about that and asking, how do I support my loved one in those situations? The American Psychological Association offers several recommendations for how to cope with uncertainty. It really begins with being kind to yourself and knowing you are not alone. Just as we would be kind to a friend or family member who was struggling during a difficult situation, we can be kind and forgiving to ourselves. This is so true for caregivers who feel a high level of responsibility. It's hard to do our best sometimes when we feel taxed. That's okay. Know that you are doing your best and that you are surrounded by many other people who are feeling almost the way you do. It's really very important to maintain your support network. Talking with friends that you trust is a helpful reminder that you're not alone in the challenges and uncertainties that you face. And I know that's true for myself, and many times Elliot and I talk together and we share our feelings. That's so important. It validates others' struggles and worries. You can also talk about how you are coping on a practical level. Are you taking time for yourself? What are you doing on a daily basis to help keep your mental and physical health in check? It's important. Create certainty where you can. Amid uncertainty, we all seek out things that we can't control. The key is to lean on healthy rather than harmful habits. This may mean making a goal to greet 3 people as you walk to your office, or in the hallway, or wherever you are, or starting a new day. It's important to kind of take time and stay in the moment. 5 minutes of meditation. We can also develop a plan to deal with situations that could potentially cause you anxiety. Uncertainty is all around us, as we heard even Elliot saying today. Yet as human beings, we crave security. We want to feel safe and have a sense of control over our lives and well-being. Fear and uncertainty can leave you feeling stressed, anxious, and powerless over the direction of your life. It can drain you emotionally and trap you in a downward spiral of endless what ifs and worst case scenarios about what tomorrow may bring. We're all different in how much uncertainty we can tolerate in life. Some people seem to enjoy taking risks and living unpredictable lives, while others find the randomness of life deeply distressing. But all of us have a limit. If you feel overwhelmed by uncertainty and worry, it's important to know that you're not alone. Many of us are in the same boat at this time. It's also important to realize that no matter how helpless and hopeless you feel, there are steps you can take to better deal with uncontrollable circumstances. Alleviate your anxiety and face the unknown with more confidence. So there's a poem right here. Let's have a look at this poem together. It was written by Mary Oliver. And it goes like this. I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I am, well, hopeless. Is my eyesight failing, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw the worrying had come to nothing and gave it up and took my old body and went out into the morning and sang. So what it's actually saying, really, we talk a lot about this. It's so important to stay in the moment. We cannot control what's going to happen in the future, and going back to the past is useless as well. So these are things that we should kind of look at. I have to tell you, so get moving. Exercise is a natural and effective stress reliever and anti-anxiety treatment. Try adding a mindfulness element and focus on how your body feels as you move. I have to also tell you that during the pandemic, and we laugh a lot about it, what I did was dance around my living room every day and felt amazing. Make time for relaxation. Choose a relaxation technique such as meditation, yoga, or deep breathing exercise, and try to set aside a time each day for regular practice. Get plenty of sleep. Excess worry and uncertainty can disturb your sleep, just as a lack of quantity of sleep can fuel anxiety and stress. Improving your daytime habit and taking time to relax and unwind before bed can help you sleep better at night. So, are any of our participants feeling anxiety or uncertainty? We'd love to talk about it, because I can tell you there are times when I feel that way, and I kind of have to go back and look at what are my coping skills? How do I get myself back in the moment? So let's open it up for discussion.
Okay, folks, all you need to do is press *6 if you're on the phone, or unmute yourself on Zoom. Go to the chat room, put your hand up. I have a little website where I can see that and call upon you. I'm anxious about getting those shots, Lucy.
Me too, Evelyn. I have to tell you that I am. And that's why I always go to Elliot and ask all the questions and make sure that. But at the end of the day, there's nothing we can do about it. Every person has to do what they feel is right for themselves. And just to share a bit, I have two adult daughters, and they're refusing to take the booster shot. And I have to respect that.
Yeah, it's just even navigating that has been challenging, I think, for a lot of people. I'm curious if anyone participating today has gotten the new bivalent booster and wants to share what their experience was like.
Go ahead and unmute your phone by pressing *6. Look at Raquel Navarro.
Hi, good morning, Elliot, and good morning, all. I did last week. I got both the flu and the updated booster, and at the same time. And I can honestly say the flu shot, no big deal, no side effects, and I usually don't. So that wasn't a surprise. And with the booster, nothing different than with the previous booster and the original COVID shots. Sore arm, slight headache, but nothing overall, no big concerns at all. So if you can do it, I highly suggest getting both at the same time.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. It's always comforting to hear from others, and I really, really appreciate that.
Yes,
Reduce my anxiety.
Yeah.
Anybody else? We're all waiting until October, eh?
Well, speaking of, and I am sensitive to time, I'm going to move a little quickly through the rest of our presentation here. I think the thing behind uncertainty is that we're lacking in knowing whom we feel like we can trust. And that has been a big issue throughout the pandemic. So I teach students all the time. That's my full-time job. But as far as I'm concerned, we're all lifelong learners. And I think the thing that we need to walk away from this experience with is learning how to think more critically and how to be more critical consumers of media. You know, a lot of people post things on Facebook about COVID. They're not doctors, they have no credentials related to public health. There's a lot of distrust in science right now, and rightfully so. You know, just for me as a public health professional trying to put together clear and concise information about when to get the bivalent booster was a challenge, because the information varies. And that's part of new science. Until we really know how everyone adjusts and adapts, there's going to be a little uncertainty right now. So if you do have questions about the safety of the COVID vaccine, you might want to turn to reading some more credible journals like the New England Journal of Medicine, or look to less biased news sources, for example, NPR, or the Canadian Broadcast Corporation or the British Broadcast Corporation. Throughout the pandemic, I have referred our caregivers to Johns Hopkins, which has a wonderful website and resources about COVID-19. They have really been my go-to. As well, speak with your doctor, ask your pharmacist. Now, in all candor, Lucy and I have talked about the new booster and when we were each going to get it. We've had the question come up today about looking to when the right time is to get that. And so that's going to be different for different people. And I think it's important that we make a calculated decision based upon our community transmission rates. So again, in our resources today, I will be sharing links where you can actually look up the flu rates in your community, the COVID rates in your community, and how they're trending. Are they moving in an upward trend, in a downward trend? I think knowledge is power. And if we can arm ourselves with the knowledge that we need to support our health, all the better. So does anyone have any quick questions, or would anyone like me to look up community transmission data in their specific community? I think I might have the opportunity to do that for one person if you'd like. If not, those resources again will be shared, and I'm sensitive to time. So we'll move forward. If Lucy, you can talk quickly about COVID fatigue, and then I will lastly finish off with monkeypox.
Well, Elliot, all of this information makes a lot of sense to me. You know, I do think many people, though, are experiencing pandemic fatigue, which may not make them even want to hear news about COVID-19, let alone having to actively research. You know, we're all tired, we're all stressed, unsure of what lies ahead. It's been 2.5 years since COVID-19 pandemic, you know, entered our lives, and it's getting old. The result, pandemic fatigue, a mixed bag of emotions and behaviors that leaves us feeling just not ourselves. It takes a notable toll on both our mental and physical health. Fundamentally, it's a natural response to prolonged, all-encompassing stress that, you know, it has demands on our emotional, our cognitive, our physical and spiritual energy. The stress comes from what we experience, as well as from the emotional and cognitive energy required to go through this. So just to kind of wrap it up, I do feel that it's so important when Elliot and I do emphasize exercise, eating well, sleeping. If you cannot manage your mental health issues, you don't have to do it alone. There are resources in the community. If it's just speaking to a trusted friend or family, if you don't want any advice, you just want someone to listen to you, then let them know. I know you can't fix this. So at the end of the day, when we talk about these issues, it's each one of you has got to take control over your emotional well-being and understand it a little bit more.
Sorry, I've been multitasking. I was just responding to someone in the chat box.
Go
And
ahead,
yes,
Elliot.
our slides will be available to everyone. I'm just going to talk about monkeypox really quickly.
Yeah.
You might have heard that monkeypox was declared a national public health emergency back in August. It made top headlines everywhere, and then it fell by the wayside. So far, there have been more than 24,000 cases of monkeypox in the US, but that is most likely an undercount. Most cases are concentrated in the gay community, primarily among men who have sex with men, but that's not always the case. And in the current outbreak, yes, the vast majority of people appear to be catching it from sexual contact. However, monkeypox is spread by touch. It is not a sexually transmitted disease. So this is very important for caregivers because we know that a lot of caregiving activities are high touch, high contact. Think about bathing, activities of daily living, physical therapy, occupational therapy, even personal services like massage, manicure, pedicure. We need to be mindful of all of these things. Earlier this summer, when I visited Canada, I was watching news from upstate New York, and the mayor in Saratoga Springs was urging all residents to get vaccinated ahead of the travel summer season because of the level of personal services, hotel and hospitality industries. They had vaccines available under a state-led public health emergency. Illinois, California, and New York were among the states to issue these emergencies early in the summer. That hasn't been the case elsewhere. And for example, here in South Florida, in order to get vaccinated against monkeypox, the eligibility criteria required that you were a man having sex with men and that you had had a sexually transmitted infection in the last 30 days. Well, I don't think most people would want to be like, yeah, that's me. So it was a huge deterrent for people getting monkeypox vaccines, which were much needed during local community outbreak. So what have we learned from the COVID pandemic? Not much, because we didn't apply it to this new pandemic. The good news is there's only been one death, and like monkeypox, how it is that it hasn't been a huge outbreak. And in fact, cases are dwindling down now, which is good. We're on a downward trend. Diseases that are more contagious and that result in a rash and things like that make people want to stay home. And the good news about that is that it helps to lower our community transmission. In addition, people in high-risk communities have gotten some level of vaccines available to them. So that's some good news too. The symptoms of monkeypox do include a rash, also fever, chills, exhaustion. It is part of the smallpox family of viruses. So symptoms can last about 3 weeks. There is an incubation period, just like there would be for chickenpox or anything else. So I think it is important just to be mindful if you have a new or an unexplained rash, certainly speak with a healthcare provider. And as I mentioned, we were going to share a bevy of resources for everyone. So I have these links here that can take you to the flu map from the CDC, the COVID map by county, Johns Hopkins COVID information, where you can find accurate and concise and scientifically founded information about the bivalent booster. As well, just like Lucy said, there is a mental health crisis across the country, which is why a new hotline was initiated, and that number is 988. It is a US-based crisis line that provides 24/7. They do offer services for free by phone and by text. So we will be handing out a copy of these resources. And now I will turn it over to Evelyn with the remaining minutes we have.
Okay, quick question. How can you tell monkeypox from chickenpox?
You necessarily can't. They both itch. Monkeypox might hurt, whereas chickenpox might not for some people. But the symptoms are quite similar. The appearance of a rash might appear similarly. And there are no drugstore over-the-counter tests that you can get just like for COVID. So you would need to go to urgent care or to seek counsel from a medical provider to find out what's what. That's one of the concerns, is that now that school is back in session, we know that chickenpox is spread in schools, and the concern has been to monitor monkeypox transmission in schools if that does happen.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So folks, I'd like you all to know that in several days, you'll be receiving a post-session questionnaire. This is really important to us because it helps us continue to really look at how you feel about the presentations and how we might improve them. It will also include any resources that we've discussed today, as well as the slides, unless you're not registered for this session. So please, if you're not registered, if you got the phone number or a Zoom link from someone else, call WellMed Charitable Foundation Customer Service at 866-390-6491 and get registered. And you'll not only get all the stuff from this session, but you'll get the fabulous monthly calendar. And usually I go through the calendar, but it looks like we've got about 20 sessions next month. So I'm not going to make it through, but I can tell you that Lucy and Elliot are doing a new session called Aging in the 21st Century, What Caregivers Need to Know Now. And I think this one will be, it'll be talking about COVID, it'll be talking about aging in place, long-term care facilities, and family dynamics. So those will be very interesting ones. And then we've just got a slew of other ones, and you will get all of the information for all of these if you are registered with the WellMed Charitable Foundation. So I want to thank all of you for what you do. I want to especially thank our wonderful presenters who I now feel like I know more about monkeypox than I've ever read in the paper. And, you know, it's maybe the paper, but I really appreciate, you know, all of your information. Elliot and Lucy, you're always, you know, the heart and soul here. And thank you too. And you do such a nice job. Also like to thank the WellMed Charitable Foundation for supporting these programs, for scheduling them, for taking your response, you know, to how you liked them or didn't like them. And we really appreciate you being here today and helping us make this a good presentation. Elliot, Lucy, any last words?
Just want to go ahead, Lucy.
Please take care of your mental well-being, not only of your physical well-being.
Truer words have never been spoken. I hope everyone stays well, and I hope that you join us for our upcoming series in October, and hope to see you all soon. Stay well.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Evelyn.
Bye-bye. Thank you guys,
Thank you.
everyone.